I never expected anything important to happen the summer my older brother kept dragging his best friend over to our house. If you'd asked me back then what I remembered most about that summer, I probably would have said the heat, the endless lawn mowing, or how impossible it was to find a job after finishing my second year of college. I definitely wouldn't have said Michael. Looking back now, though, everything seemed to start with him. My name's Adam. I was 21 that summer, home from college and trying to save money before the next semester. My brother Clint was 24 and had been inseparable from Michael since they were 15. If one of them showed up somewhere, the other wasn't usually far behind. Michael had practically grown up in our house. Mom treated him like another son. Dad trusted him more than he trusted Clint. Even our dog got more excited when Michael walked through the front door than when anyone else came over. And honestly, I couldn't blame the dog. Michael was the kind of guy everyone liked, without really knowing why. He wasn't loud. He wasn't trying to be the center of attention. He just had this easy confidence that made people relax around him. He was 25, worked as an electrician, and somehow always looked like he just stepped out of an ad for work boots and pickup trucks. Dark brown hair that was always slightly messy, broad shoulders from years of physical work, and that crooked smile that made it impossible to stay annoyed with him for long. Girls loved him. Guys wanted to be friends with him. Me? I spent years trying very hard not to stare. Not that it mattered. As far as anyone knew, Michael was straight. He dated a few girls over the years. Nothing serious, at least nothing that lasted. I'd accepted a long time ago that my stupid crush wasn't going anywhere. So, I buried it. Whenever he came over, I acted normal. We joked. We watched sports with Clint. Sometimes we'd all grill in the backyard or play cards until midnight. Normal, safe. At least it had always been that way. Until that summer, the first thing I noticed was how often Michael started talking to me instead of my brother. It was little things. So, how's college going? You still into photography? Did you ever finish editing those hiking pictures? Stuff that shouldn't have mattered, except he remembered everything. Conversations we'd had months earlier. Random little details I'd completely forgotten telling him. One Saturday afternoon, Clint disappeared inside to answer a phone call, leaving Michael and me outside assembling a new grill Dad had bought. Well, Michael assembled it. I mostly handed him bolts while pretending I knew what I was doing. "You've gotten stronger," he said casually while tightening one of the screws. I looked up. "What?" He shrugged. "Last year, you couldn't even carry one of these boxes." I laughed. "I started going to the gym." I noticed. Something about the way he said it made me pause. He didn't look up from what he was doing, just kept tightening the bolt. "You noticed?" He finally glanced at me. "Yeah." Then he smiled. "Good for you." That should have been the end of it. Probably was, except for some reason, my face felt warm for the next 10 minutes. Later that evening, we all sat outside eating burgers. Mom disappeared inside to grab drinks. Dad was arguing with Clint about baseball. Michael was sitting beside me on the patio bench. Not unusually close, just closer than I remembered. Our knees bumped once. Neither of us moved. Then it happened again. Still, nobody moved. I kept telling myself I was imagining things. Then Michael leaned over slightly. "You still taking those sunrise pictures?" I nodded. "When I wake up early enough." "You should show me sometime." "You want to see them?" "I've wanted to." That answer surprised me. I didn't know you were into photography. "I'm not." He looked toward the backyard for a second before looking back at me. "I just like seeing things people care about." I didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever put it like that before. Before I could answer, Clint came back outside carrying drinks. "What are you two talking about?" Michael answered immediately. "Nothing." I looked at him. He was already reaching for his soda. Nothing about his expression seemed unusual. Still, for some reason, that one word stuck with me. Nothing. Except over the next few weeks, it definitely didn't stay nothing. Every time Michael came over, he somehow ended up talking to me. He'd ask about work, about school, about books I was reading. Sometimes Clint would leave the room for 10 minutes, and Michael would stay in the kitchen talking with me instead of following him. It was subtle, almost impossible to notice unless you were paying attention. I told myself I was reading too much into it, that maybe we were just becoming friends. That would make sense, wouldn't it? Then came the family barbecue, and for the first time, Michael did something that made it impossible to ignore the feeling that something had changed between us. The barbecue started like every family barbecue we'd ever had. Too much food, too many people, my aunt insisting everyone take home leftovers before they'd even finished eating. Kids running through the yard with water balloons while the adults argued about politics like they had every summer for the last 20 years. I was helping Dad carry folding chairs out of the garage when Clint pulled into the driveway. Michael climbed out of the passenger seat. Even from across the yard, he spotted me. Instead of waving at everyone, he waved at me first. I lifted a hand automatically. "You gonna help?" Dad asked. "I am helping." "You've carried one chair." I carried it very emotionally. Dad rolled his eyes. "Your generation." I laughed and grabbed another stack. A few minutes later, everyone settled into small groups around the backyard. Clint disappeared almost immediately when two of his friends showed up. Michael didn't. Instead, he wandered over to where I was filling the cooler with ice. "You need another bag?" I looked up. "Yeah, actually. I'll grab it." "You don't have to." "I know." He smiled. "But I'm already standing." 5 minutes later, he came back carrying not one bag, but three. "You planning to freeze the neighborhood?" I asked. He shrugged. "I overestimated." "You definitely did." "I panic bought." That made me laugh harder than it should have. "You laugh a lot easier than you used to," he said. "What does that mean?" "When you were younger, you always looked nervous around people." I blinked. "I did? You don't remember?" "No." Michael leaned against the fence. "You'd answer questions with one word." "I was shy." "I know. You noticed that too?" He looked almost amused. "Adam." "Yeah?" "I've known you since you were 14. "Fair enough." "I notice things." For some reason, that sentence stayed with me. By late afternoon, the backyard had turned into organized chaos. Someone started a volleyball game. Kids were screaming near the sprinkler. Music drifted through the patio speakers. Mom volunteered me to carry drinks outside. Again. As I stepped through the sliding door, I nearly collided with Michael. "Sorry." "My fault," he said. Neither of us moved immediately. We were standing ridiculously close in the narrow doorway. "You first," I said. "You've got drinks." "So?" "So, if I move first, you'll spill them." He had a point. I squeezed past him. My shoulder brushed against his chest. Just for a second. Still. It felt strangely intentional. When I reached the patio table, I realized I'd forgotten the bottle opener. "You forgot something." I turned. Michael was already holding it up. "You read my mind? You made the exact same face you made last 4th of July." "What face?" "The I forgot something important face." "I have one." "You absolutely do." I couldn't help laughing. "You pay way too much attention." His smile softened. "Maybe." That answer hit me strangely. Before I could think about it, Clint called from across the yard. "Mike." Michael looked toward him. "Coming." But before walking away, he looked back at me. "I'll be right back." He said it so naturally that I barely questioned it. Except, he actually came back. 10 minutes later, 15, 20. Every time Clint joined another conversation, Michael somehow wandered back over. It wasn't obvious. Nobody else would have noticed. But I did. As the sun started setting, Most of the kids went inside, leaving the adults talking around the fire pit. I slipped away to the back fence, where it was quieter. Photography had always been my excuse for disappearing. The sunset looked incredible behind the trees. Orange and pink streaks stretched across the sky. I pulled out my camera. You actually brought it. Michael's voice startled me. I turned. I always keep it in my car. He walked over beside me. Can I see? I handed him the camera instead of scrolling quickly. He looked at every photo, slowly. You took these? Yeah. They're really good. I shrugged awkwardly. They're okay. He lowered the camera. No. His voice was unusually serious. They're really good. I felt my ears getting warm. Thanks. He kept looking through them. Landscapes, city streets, old buildings, morning fog. Then he stopped on a picture I'd almost deleted. It was Clint and Michael sitting on our dock last summer. Neither of them looking at the camera, just laughing about something. You kept this? I like the lighting. He looked at the photo a little longer, then quietly asked, Was it really the lighting? I froze. He looked at me instead of the screen. There was something different in his expression. Something thoughtful, almost hopeful. I don't know, I admitted. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The backyard noise felt very far away. Finally, Michael handed the camera back. I'm glad you didn't delete it. My heart was beating much faster than it should have been. Why? He smiled. Because it's one of my favorite pictures anyone's ever taken of me. Before I could answer, Clint shouted from the deck, Mike, we're starting cards. Michael sighed dramatically. Duty calls. He took a few steps away, then stopped. You free tomorrow? I frowned. Yeah. Why? I've got a small electrical job at your parents' place. I know. You want to help? You trust me with electricity? He laughed. Absolutely not. Then, why me? His grin widened. Because I like talking to you. Then he walked away before I could think of a response. I stood there holding my camera, trying very hard to convince myself that my brother's best friend hadn't just asked to spend the day alone with me. The next morning, I almost talked myself out of helping him. Not because I didn't want to, because I wanted to a little too much. I kept replaying what he'd said the night before. Because I like talking to you. There were probably a dozen perfectly normal explanations for that sentence. Friends like talking to friends. That was it, nothing more. At least that's what I kept repeating while pulling on a t-shirt and heading downstairs. Michael's truck was already in the driveway. Dad met him outside. Morning, Mike. Morning. Dad pointed toward the garage. The outlet by the workbench keeps cutting out. I'll take a look. I stepped outside with a mug of coffee. Michael looked over immediately. There he is. You been here long? 5 minutes. Dad handed him a toolbox. I'm running to the hardware store. Adam can help if you need another pair of hands. I definitely will, Michael answered before I could say anything. Dad nodded and left. Just like that. The house was quiet. Mom had gone grocery shopping. Clint was at work. It was just the two of us. Michael opened the garage door. So? You ever held a flashlight professionally? I laughed. I've had years of experience. Perfect. I'll even point it in the right direction. I appreciate the confidence. For the next hour, I mostly handed him tools while pretending I understood what he was doing. He explained things anyway, not in a way that made me feel stupid, just patiently. This wire's burned. How can you tell? Smell it. I leaned closer. It smells bad. Exactly. I would have described it as spicy. He laughed. Electrical spice. I think that's scientifically accurate. You should write textbooks. The conversation stayed easy, comfortable, like we'd been doing this for years. At one point, I climbed onto a step stool to hold a light above the outlet. Michael steadied the stool automatically. You don't have to hold it. I know. I'm not going anywhere. I know. So, why are you holding it? He looked up at me. Because I'd rather look dumb than let you fall. The answer came so naturally that it caught me completely off guard. Our eyes met. Neither of us spoke. Then the drill buzzed back to life. The moment disappeared, or at least we both pretended it had. Around noon, we took a break. Michael sat on the back steps with a bottle of water while I made sandwiches. When I came outside, he moved over without saying anything, leaving room beside him. I sat, our shoulders almost touched. "You've changed." I looked at him. "You said that yesterday." "I know." "What changed?" He thought for a second. "You seem happier." I stared out at the yard. "I think college helped." "Yeah?" "I finally stopped pretending to be someone else." The words slipped out before I realized what I'd said. Michael looked at me carefully. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. "I don't know. You can tell me." There was something about his voice, calm, patient, safe. I spent most of high school worrying about what everyone thought, and now I still worry. I laughed quietly. "Just less." He nodded. "I noticed." "You notice everything." He smiled. "Only when it matters." There it was again. Another sentence that sounded simple, but didn't feel simple. I changed the subject. "So, why haven't you settled down yet?" He looked genuinely surprised. "What?" "I mean, everyone keeps asking. My mom asks every Sunday." "So?" He chuckled. "I haven't met the right person. What happened with your last girlfriend?" He was quiet for several seconds. "It wasn't fair to her." "What wasn't?" "I kept trying to force something that never felt right." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked down at the water bottle turning slowly in his hands. "I cared about her." But not the way she deserved?" Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. Before I could ask anything else, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. "It's Clint." He answered. "Yeah?" "No, we're almost done." "Yeah, tell your mom I'll fix the porch light too." "All right." He hung up. "My brother checking up on you?" He wanted to know if I was stealing his little brother. He laughed as he said it. I laughed too. Then I noticed his smile faded almost immediately, like the joke wasn't funny anymore. By late afternoon, the electrical work was finished. Michael packed his tools into the truck. "Thanks for helping." "I barely did anything." "You kept me company." "I'm very talented at that." "I know." He leaned against the truck door. "You want to grab dinner?" The question came out casually, almost too casually. I blinked. "Just us?" "Yeah." I hesitated. "I don't know if Clint—" "I'm not asking Clint." He smiled slightly. "I'm asking you." My heart started pounding. "Sure." "Great." Then, almost as if he realized how that sounded, he added, "If you want to." "I do." His smile returned. "The diner on Maple?" "7. 7." He climbed into the truck. As he started the engine, he rolled the window down. "Oh." "What?" "Don't tell Clint yet." I frowned. "Why?" Michael looked toward the road for a second before meeting my eyes again. "I don't know." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I just want tonight to be ours." Then he drove away, leaving me standing in the driveway, wondering why my brother's best friend suddenly seemed to be looking at me like I was someone he'd been trying to notice all along. I spent the next 2 hours trying to convince myself that dinner didn't mean anything. Friends grabbed dinner all the time. Michael and Clint had done it for years. The only difference was that this time, it was just me. Still, I changed shirts 3 times before leaving. By the time I reached the diner, Michael was already there. He was leaning against his truck, hands in the pockets of a faded gray hoodie. When he saw me, he smiled. "You actually came." I laughed. "You invited me." "I know." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I just wasn't sure you'd think it was weird." "Should I?" His smile grew. "I hope not." Inside, the diner was nearly empty. We slid into a booth near the window. The waitress brought menus. "What are you getting?" Michael asked. "The burger." "You always order the burger." "You noticed?" You've ordered the same thing every time we've eaten here. I shook my head. You're impossible. I have a good memory. You have an unsettling memory. I'll accept that. When the waitress walked away, the conversation settled naturally. We talked about work, about college, about Clint's terrible driving, about movies we'd both been meaning to watch. For the first hour, everything felt normal, easy. Then, Michael asked something unexpected. So? So? When did you know? I frowned. When did I know what? He looked down at his coffee for a second. About yourself. My stomach tightened. He hadn't said the word. He didn't have to. I studied his face. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't uncomfortable. He was just waiting. I was 16. His eyes met mine again. I think I always knew. He nodded slowly. I figured. You figured. You never looked at girls the way Clint did. I laughed quietly. Nobody looked at girls the way Clint did. Fair point. There was a brief silence. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind for years. Did my brother ever tell you? No. Michael shook his head immediately. You did. I don't remember telling you. You didn't. Now I was confused. What? The day you came home after your first semester? He smiled faintly. Your mom was making dinner. You were there. You kept talking about this guy from one of your classes. I searched my memory. I did? You smiled every time you said his name. Heat rushed into my face. Oh, I wasn't trying to figure anything out. He looked almost embarrassed. It just clicked, and you never said anything. It wasn't my place. I stared at him. Thank you. He shrugged. There wasn't anything to thank me for. There really was. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. The waitress returned with our food. The conversation drifted to lighter topics. But something had changed. The air between us felt more honest, like we'd quietly crossed a line neither of us had acknowledged before. After dinner, neither of us seemed ready to go home. You want to walk? Michael asked. Sure. The park across the street was almost empty. Streetlights reflected across the small lake. Crickets filled the quiet between our conversations. We walked side by side. Not talking much. It wasn't awkward, just comfortable. Eventually, Michael stopped near the wooden dock. I come here sometimes. By yourself? He nodded. When I need to think. I leaned against the railing. What do you think about? He laughed softly. Everything. Helpful answer. I know. He looked out across the water. Can I ask you something? You've already asked a lot. I know. This one's different. I nodded. Go ahead. He took a slow breath. Have you ever liked someone you knew you shouldn't? My heart skipped. What do you mean? Someone. He searched for the words. Who complicated everything? I looked at the water. Yeah. What happened? I kept it to myself. Why? Because losing them would have hurt more. Michael stayed quiet. After a long pause, he asked, Did it work? I smiled sadly. Not really. He let out a slow breath. Yeah. You? He didn't answer immediately. Finally, he nodded. I'm trying. Something in his voice sounded tired, almost frustrated. I wanted to ask who. I wanted to know why. Instead, I simply asked, Is it someone I know? Michael smiled without looking at me. Very well. My pulse started climbing again. There were dozens of people he could have meant. Co-workers, old classmates, family friends. So why did it suddenly feel like I was afraid of the answer? We started walking back toward the parking lot. Halfway there, Michael slowed. Adam. Yeah? I'm glad you came. I am too. I mean it. So do I. He smiled. For a second, it looked like he wanted to say something else. Instead, he opened his truck door. I should get you home. The drive back was quieter, not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. When we pulled into my parents' driveway, the porch light was still on. Clint's truck sat beside mine. Michael turned off the engine. I had a good time. I did too. Neither of us reached for the door. You know, Michael said quietly, If Clint asks, I'll tell him we grabbed dinner. He nodded. Yeah. Another pause. Then he laughed softly. I don't know why I was nervous. You were nervous? A little. I was too. He looked at me. A real smile spread across his face. I'm glad it wasn't just me. Before either of us could say anything else, the front door opened. Clint stepped outside. There you guys are. Michael and I looked at each other for the briefest moment. Then we climbed out of the truck. Neither of us noticed that Clint had been watching us for much longer than either of us realized. I knew something was off the second Clint looked from me to Michael and back again. Not angry, just curious. You guys take the scenic route or something? He asked with a grin. Michael answered before I could. Traffic? There isn't any traffic between here and Maple. There was tonight. Clint laughed. Sure. I unlocked the front door. You coming in? Michael shook his head. I've got an early job tomorrow. Mom appeared in the hallway. Leaving already? Yeah. She hugged him like she always did. Drive safe. I will. As he walked back toward his truck, he looked over his shoulder. Our eyes met for only a second. Then he smiled. A small one. The kind that almost looked private. He drove away. Clint watched the truck disappear before turning toward me. So what? You and Michael seem different lately? My stomach tightened. What do you mean? He shrugged. I don't know. He grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. He asks about you a lot. I tried to sound casual. He does? Yeah. Heat crept into my face. What does he ask? How's Adam doing? Has Adam gone back to school yet? Adam still into photography? Clint twisted the cap off his bottle. I figured you guys were just becoming friends. I forced a laugh. Yeah. Good. He smiled. You're good for each other. That sentence stayed with me the rest of the night. Over the next week, Michael kept finding reasons to stop by. Sometimes Clint wasn't even home. One afternoon, I was washing my car when his truck pulled into the driveway. He rolled the window down. Busy? I looked at the half-soapy car. Obviously. He grinned. I need your opinion. On what? I bought a camera. I blinked. You bought a camera? You've infected me. I don't believe you. He reached across the passenger seat and held it up. It was real. Not expensive, but definitely real. When did this happen? Yesterday. You don't even take pictures. I figured somebody could teach me. I stared at him. You drove over here? To ask you how to use a camera. Pretty much, I laughed. You know YouTube exists. I know. But YouTube isn't you. That answer lingered between us. Finally, I tossed the sponge back into the bucket. All right. For the next hour, we wandered around the neighborhood while I explained the basics. Lighting, focus, composition. He listened carefully, asked questions, actually paid attention. At one point, he lifted the camera toward me. Don't. Why? I hate being photographed. I know. He smiled behind the viewfinder. But I like this one. Before I could protest, click. You didn't. I absolutely did. Delete it. No. Michael, you'll thank me later. I won't. He laughed. You smile differently when you aren't posing? I folded my arms. You're impossible. I've heard that. He lowered the camera. I'm serious. What? You look happier when you forget someone's watching. For some reason, nobody had ever said something like that to me before. A few days later, Clint invited everyone to the lake. Just the three of us. It was supposed to be a relaxing Saturday. Fishing, swimming, grilling lunch. Nothing unusual. The weather was perfect. By noon, Clint had already managed to get his fishing line tangled in a tree. Michael couldn't stop laughing. I told you not to cast that way. I knew what I was doing. You absolutely didn't. I blame the tree. The tree, it moved. Michael looked at me. Did the tree move? I shook my head. Nope. Traitor? Clint finally gave up and wandered toward the dock to untangle everything. leaving Michael and me by the picnic table. I think he actually believes the tree attacked him. Michael chuckled. I wouldn't rule it out. There was an easy silence after that, the kind we'd started falling into naturally. Then he spoke. You know, yeah, I haven't laughed this much in a long time. I smiled. That's because my brother's a disaster. He looked at me instead. No. A pause. It's because of you. I looked away before he could see my face. You're making me blush. I know. You keep doing that. What? Saying things that catch me off guard. I don't mean to. His voice had gone quieter. He stopped himself. You just what? He shook his head. Nothing. I almost let it go. Almost. Instead, I asked, Michael. He looked at me. Is something bothering you? He held my gaze for several seconds. Then Clint shouted from the dock, I need help. Michael let out a breath. Apparently, your brother's fighting another tree. The moment disappeared. Again, but this time, I wasn't sure either of us wanted it to. Later that afternoon, after Clint finally admitted defeat against nature, we packed everything into the truck. Michael and I loaded the cooler together. Our hands reached for the same handle. His fingers brushed mine. Neither of us pulled away immediately. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, 3 at most, long enough that I felt my heartbeat in my throat. Michael slowly let go. Sorry. It's okay. Our eyes met. There was something there, something unspoken, something that had been building for weeks. Neither of us said a word because Clint was only a few feet away, because neither of us was ready, because once one of us finally admitted what was happening, there would be no pretending anymore. After the lake trip, things became impossible to ignore, not because anything dramatic happened, because everything stayed almost exactly the same, except now. I noticed every little thing. Michael texting me instead of asking Clint, sending me random pictures from job sites because he thought I'd like the lighting, asking if I'd edited any new photos, stopping by with coffee if he happened to be working nearby. None of it was inappropriate, none of it crossed a line, but together, it started feeling like we were building something neither of us had planned. One Tuesday evening, I was editing photos on the back porch when my phone buzzed. Michael, busy? Me, not really. A few seconds later, another message appeared. Michael, come outside. I looked toward the driveway. His truck was parked there. I laughed to myself before walking around the house. You could have knocked. I could have. So why didn't you? He held up a paper bag. I brought pie. I stared at him. You interrupted my evening. For pie. It's homemade. That changes everything. He smiled. I thought it might. We sat on the porch steps, eating slices straight from paper plates. While the sun slowly disappeared behind the trees, it was quiet. Comfortable. You know, I said, most people would have just texted. I know. So why come all the way over? He shrugged. I wanted to see you. The words landed softly, matter of fact, like he hadn't realized how much they meant. I looked down at my plate. I'm glad you did. Neither of us spoke for a while after that. A few days later, Clint invited me to meet him downtown after work. When I arrived, Michael was already there. Surprise? Clint said. We're kidnapping you. For what? Dinner. I already ate. Liar, Michael said. You always eat late. I looked at him. How do you know that? You told me. I did? 3 months ago. Clint laughed. I swear, Mike remembers everything. I've noticed. We spent the evening wandering through the downtown summer festival, food trucks, live music, local artists selling paintings and handmade jewelry. At one booth, an older woman was doing quick charcoal portraits. Clint pointed immediately. Adam should do one. No. Yes. No. Michael looked between us. I think you should. You're supposed to be on my side. I am. So, why are you agreeing with him? Because I want one too. 20 minutes later, we were sitting side by side while the artist sketched. Look at each other for a second, she said. It's easier to capture expressions. I turned instinctively. So did Michael. Our eyes met. The artist smiled without looking up from her paper. Perfect. Neither of us moved. Neither of us seemed to remember we were supposed to. Okay, she laughed. You can relax now. I looked away first. When the portraits were finished, Clint grabbed his and wandered toward another booth. Michael stayed beside me. He looked down at the drawing, then quietly asked, Can I keep this? It's yours. No. He pointed to mine. I mean yours. I blinked. Why? He smiled. So, I'll have a good picture of you. My heart skipped. You've got that photo you took. I know. I like this one better. The drive home was quieter than usual. Clint had left earlier with friends, so Michael offered to take me. Halfway there, rain started pouring. He slowed the truck. Worst timing. I kind of like storms. He glanced at me. Me too. The rain became so heavy that visibility almost disappeared. Michael pulled into an empty overlook above the river. We'll wait it out. Thunder rolled across the sky. Raindrops hammered against the windshield. For a while, we just watched them. Finally, he broke the silence. Can I tell you something? You've been asking permission a lot lately. I have. You can tell me. He took a slow breath. I've been trying very hard not to make things complicated. I turned toward him. What do you mean? His hand stayed resting on the steering wheel. I keep telling myself to act normal. You seem normal? He laughed softly. I promise you, this isn't normal for me. I waited. I look forward to seeing you every day. My pulse quickened. When my phone buzzes, I hope it's you. He looked down. And when it isn't? He smiled sadly. I'm disappointed. I couldn't find any words. He finally met my eyes again. I don't know when that started. Outside, rain continued pounding the truck. Inside, everything felt completely still. I've been trying to ignore it, he admitted. Because you're Clint's little brother. He shook his head. Not because of your age. Because you're important to him. A long silence followed. Finally, I asked the question I'd been carrying for weeks. Michael, yeah? Am I the person you've been talking about? He closed his eyes for just a second. When he opened them again, he nodded. Yes. The word was barely louder than the rain. Every doubt I'd been carrying suddenly disappeared. Because I'd known. Some part of me had known. I swallowed. I thought I was imagining it. A small, relieved smile appeared on his face. So did I. Neither of us moved. Neither of us reached across the seat. We simply sat there, smiling at each other as the storm slowly began to pass. But both of us knew. The hardest conversation was still waiting. Because before anything else could happen, they had to tell Clint. Neither of us said much on the drive home. Not because there wasn't anything left to say, because we'd finally said the one thing we'd both been avoiding. Michael liked me, and somehow, I'd never felt calmer. When he pulled into my parents' driveway, the porch light was still on. He turned off the engine, but didn't reach for the door. I don't want to hide this forever, he said quietly. I don't either. But Clint deserves to hear it from us. I nodded. He does. Michael let out a slow breath. I'm honestly more nervous about telling him than I was telling you. I laughed softly. I noticed. You weren't supposed to. I've known you a long time, too. That made him smile. You really have. He looked at the house for a moment before turning back to me. Tomorrow? You mean, we tell him? My stomach fluttered. Together? Together? He nodded once. Okay. I barely slept that night. Not because I was worried about Michael. I trusted him completely. I was worried about Clint. My brother had always been protective. Not controlling, just protective. He'd been there when I came out to my parents. He'd scared off one guy in high school who thought making jokes at my expense was funny. He'd always had my back, but this was different. This involved his best friend, the person he'd trusted most for almost 10 years. I had no idea how he was going to react. The next afternoon, Michael came over. Clint was already in the garage, changing the oil in his truck. I found Michael standing beside his pickup for almost a full minute before he got out. "You okay?" He laughed nervously. "I've faced live electrical panels that scared me less than this." "Want to run?" He looked at me. "For about 5 seconds. I'll race you," he smiled. "Nah." He took a deep breath. "Let's do this." The garage smelled like motor oil and coffee. Clint looked up when we walked in together. "Perfect timing." He wiped his hands on a rag. "One of you grab me that wrench." Neither of us moved. Clint noticed immediately. "What's going on?" Michael looked at me. I looked back at him. He gave the smallest nod. "I need to tell you something," I said. Clint frowned. "You're freaking me out." Michael stepped forward. "No one's hurt." "Okay, but it's important." The smile disappeared from Clint's face. He leaned against the workbench. "I'm listening." For a second, nobody spoke. Finally, Michael broke the silence. "I've developed feelings for Adam." The words hung in the air. Clint blinked once, twice, then looked at me. I nodded slowly. "I feel the same way." The garage became unbelievably quiet. Clint stared at the floor, then at Michael, then back at me. Nobody rushed him. Nobody tried filling the silence. Finally, he spoke. "So," his voice was strangely calm. "When exactly did this happen?" Michael answered honestly. "I don't know. It wasn't planned." "I believe you." Clint rubbed the back of his neck. "I've been noticing something for weeks." Both of us looked at him. "You have?" He snorted. "You two are terrible at hiding where your eyes go." My face immediately heated up. Michael looked equally embarrassed. "You knew?" I suspected. He laughed quietly. "I kept waiting for one of you to figure it out." Michael looked genuinely confused. "You weren't angry?" Clint stared at him. "Should I be? You don't think I crossed a line?" There was a long pause. Then Clint walked over and punched Michael lightly on the shoulder. "If you ever hurt him?" Michael nodded before Clint even finished. "I won't." "I know." Clint smiled for the first time since we'd walked in. "That's the problem." "What?" "I know you." He looked at me. And I know you." Another pause. "I trust both of you." Relief hit me so suddenly, I had to sit down on the nearby stool. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding my breath. Clint noticed. "Dude." He laughed. "You thought I was going to throw him out." I didn't know. "You two are adults." He shrugged. "I don't get to decide who either of you likes." Michael looked at him carefully. So? We're okay?" Clint rolled his eyes dramatically. "You're still helping me move next month." Michael laughed. "I deserve that." "You definitely did." The tension finally disappeared. For the first time all day, all three of us laughed. That evening, the three of us ordered pizza. It felt strangely normal, almost anticlimactic. Mom and Dad were visiting relatives, so the house stayed quiet. At one point, Clint looked between us and shook his head. "You know what's funny?" "What?" I asked. "I spent years trying to introduce Michael to nice women." Michael groaned. "Please don't remind me." And the whole time, Clint pointed between us. The answer was literally sitting in my living room. Michael looked over at me. I smiled back. Maybe life really could surprise you, even after you'd convinced yourself nothing unexpected would ever happen. Only one thing remained: telling my parents, and hoping the beginning of something real would be just as strong as everything that had led us there. Telling my parents turned out to be nothing like I'd imagined. I'd spent 2 full days preparing for every possible reaction: confusion, shock, 100 difficult questions. Instead, Mom looked at me for about 3 seconds before smiling. I was wondering when you two were finally going to stop pretending. I blinked. What? Dad looked equally amused. You thought we didn't notice? I stared at Clint. You knew. He pointed at our parents. They knew? Mom folded her arms. Adam, sweetheart. She smiled gently. Michael has looked at you like you hung the moon for weeks. I felt my face immediately turn red. Dad chuckled. And you weren't exactly subtle either. Michael rubbed the back of his neck. We thought we were hiding it. You weren't, Mom said. You were just being respectful. She walked over and hugged me first, then Michael. I only have one rule. Michael straightened immediately. Anything. If this relationship is going to happen, she smiled warmly. Take care of each other. I will. I know you will. Dad stepped forward. He wasn't a particularly emotional man, never had been, but he placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. You've been part of this family for years. He looked at me. That hasn't changed. Then back at Michael. It just means you're dating my son now. Michael nodded. Yes, sir. Dad laughed. Stop calling me sir. The room finally relaxed. I looked around the kitchen. Mom was smiling. Dad looked completely at ease. Clint was already stealing cookies from the counter. Everything felt normal. Not perfect, just right. The weeks that followed were strangely ordinary. Michael still came over all the time, only now. Nobody wondered why he sat beside me. Nobody questioned why we disappeared for evening walks. Nobody teased us when we spent hours talking on the porch. Well, almost nobody. Clint absolutely refused to stop making jokes. You guys done staring at each other? We're having a conversation? Looks like staring. Another day, he walked into the kitchen and immediately sighed dramatically. Oh, good. What? My best friend and my brother are being disgustingly adorable again. Michael laughed. You'll survive. I don't know. Clint grabbed a soda. It's emotionally exhausting. I threw a napkin at him. He grinned. Worth it. One Saturday morning, Michael knocked on my bedroom door. You awake? Barely. Get dressed. Why? I've got a surprise. 20 minutes later, we were driving out of town. Where are we going? You'll see. An hour later, he pulled into a small overlook above a lake I'd never visited before. The morning sun reflected across perfectly still water. It's beautiful. I found it a few months ago. He looked at me. I wanted to bring you here. We walked down a narrow trail until we reached a quiet dock. Nobody else was around, just birds, water, and the sound of wind moving through the trees. Michael leaned against the railing. So? I've been thinking. Dangerous. I know. He smiled. I spent a long time trying to convince myself I shouldn't feel this way. I slipped my hands into my pockets. Me too. I kept thinking about Clint, and he told me something after you went inside the other night. I looked over. What did he say? Michael laughed quietly. He said, he paused for dramatic effect. You're an idiot for waiting this long. I burst out laughing. That sounds exactly like him. It does. We stood there smiling at the water. Finally, Michael reached for my hand, not hurriedly, not nervously, just naturally. Our fingers intertwined. This time, there was nobody to hide from. No wondering, no pretending, just us. I wish I'd figured it out sooner, he admitted. I squeezed his hand gently. If you had, I smiled. Maybe I wouldn't have been ready. He thought about that for a second. You're probably right. I know I am, he laughed. You've gotten confident. I learned from someone. Oh? He notices everything. Michael smiled that familiar, crooked smile. The annoying guy? The very one. We stayed there until the sun climbed higher into the sky, talking, laughing, planning little weekend trips, as arguing about which movies we'd watch first. Nothing dramatic, nothing unbelievable. Just two people finally getting the chance they'd almost missed. Sometimes people ask me when I knew everything had changed. They expect me to name the rainy afternoon in his truck, or our first dinner together, or the moment he admitted how he felt. But honestly, I think it happened much earlier. It happened the first time my brother's best friend looked at me. Like I wasn't just his best friend's little brother anymore. Like I was simply Adam, the person he wanted to know, the person he wanted beside him. And looking back now, I'm really glad he started acting different around me. Because if he hadn't, I might have spent the rest of my life wondering what could have happened. Instead, I got my answer, and somehow it was even better than I'd imagined.